Hello, my name is Lee Upton, and my favorite things are rabbits.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello, and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. I am joined today by author, poet, and essayist Lee Upton. Lee's new novel, Wrongful, is being published in May from, was it Sagging Meniscus?
Yes.
Sagging Meniscus Press. Wrongful is, we will talk more about the story, but Wrongful is available in May. And Lee, I am so excited to be spending my Sunday morning with you.
I'm delighted to be talking with you.
So yesterday, I have to tell you, I'm in Chicago. It was 70 degrees yesterday, and it is snowing this morning.
Oh.
So I hope it is not snowing where you are.
No, it's not. I haven't stepped outside yet. It's a little gray and overcast, but no snow.
Nice. Well, let's talk about your novel. It seems that you have a lot of novels kind of in the works, that you've got 5 or 6 planned out at this point, but let's talk about Wrongful.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, Wrongful comes out in May from the wonderful unconventional press, Sagging Meniscus. And it is a literary mystery in which writers are behaving badly. I know that's shocking that writers would behave badly, but it's set at 2 literary festivals 10 years apart. And the novel opens when a popular novelist who partly funded the festival and whose work is being celebrated disappears.
Oh.
So we meet a number of characters, and then 10 years later, a woman who'd been at the first festival returns when there's a festival held in honor of the novelist who disappears. And so she tries to find out what really happened. And given that some of the same characters are reappearing 10 years later at a festival, she seeks to interview them. She is accompanied by a former priest. And so it was a delight to write. It actually grew out of a failed short story, a really failed short story. That, of course, I thought worked. Initially, I don't know if you feel that way, but I'll write something.
Did it fail because it became a novel? Like, is it a failed short story because it was too long, or was it a failed short story because you couldn't find the ending? What does it mean for a short story to fail?
Well, in this case, it actually gave me 2 novels, but it failed within its genre as a short story, probably because of premature closure.
Okay.
It was the plot was too complex to fit in a short story. You would always feel unsatisfied by that story, no matter how much the author enjoyed it. It just didn't work. It needed to be longer and with more little alleyways and more explication in some ways through action. But it gave me the previous novel from last year, Tabitha Get Up, is a comic novel. And that grew from the failed short story's ending. At the end of the failed short story, one of the characters writes an email. And I loved working with the voice of that character. It was a really high energy, greedy little voice. But so I love the rhythms of it. I love to work with. And then I thought, I'll just take this character and create a novel from her voice. But she was so mean that I couldn't write 300 pages with her. I thought,
you didn't want to spend that much time with someone as mean as her.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so what I did was I kept her rhythms, but deeply changed the character. So the character in that novel, Tabitha Get Up, she's 50 years old. She's very struggling. She's very kind-hearted and she's very loyal, and she meets up with a lot of resistance in her life. So that was a pleasure that grew out of that failed short story. But the novel Wrongful, the new novel that comes out in May, derives from the plot. And what I did was extended the plot, got to know characters much better, and had the joy of working with a mystery. something that I remember Kate Rakulia, the author, once said. She visited a class I was teaching and talked about how all novels in some ways are mysteries. And that was so resonant for me because I thought about it and I thought, yes, novels, from James Joyce, and Henry James, there's a sense of there's a secret, there's a revelation, there's an unspooling. So that sense of the mystery, I think, was generative for me in writing what is a mystery in some ways, and follows some of the contours we expect from a mystery. It's also a bit of a homage, Wrongful is, to mystery writers. At a difficult time in my life, when I was really having a hard time, I started reading Agatha Christie's novels, which were immensely comforting to me because they helped me not think about my life, but focus on these, this small contained world of logical puzzles. So I think Wrongful in some ways, it's a homage to Agatha Christie, a homage to, being wrong. It's called Wrongful. And mysteries are about letting people get things wrong. In our lives, when we get things wrong, we tend to scold ourselves or boil our minds alive. But in a mystery, even as a writer, I got a lot of things wrong, had to rework these. But I think that was very helpful in trying to mislead the reader. I had to outwit myself.
I'm curious, when you're writing, are you an author who lives with the characters? Are they visiting you in your head all the time? Are you someone who outlines before you write and that's how you find the story? Do you write by the seat of your pants? What is your writing process?
It's been very different between whatever the genre and even between genres, particularly between novels. With poetry, I always think of poetry as a kind of whirlpool and you entering into this. And I write a lot of drafts with poetry and allow time to work on those drafts because I want to, there's write what you know. So much of this isn't original with me, I'm sure, but I always think of, writing what you don't know, And so poetry is very much about that. And I think that's true with novels too, that I'm trying to get at some mystery. Something is keeping me from understanding something about life and our circumstances. So with novels, it's very different. With the comic novel, I had the most wonderful time. I was dealing with a family member's, severe illness and all. And so it was, a way to create, strengthen myself to create a kind of zone where very different things happened. It was almost a fantasy novel because a lot of kind of beautiful things in the midst of self-humiliation happened for the character. And that almost wrote itself. It was sort of like I needed to write it. It was partly, though, because the form of the novel was in kind of little chunks. It moves chronologically, much like a diary. I don't know if I'll ever have that experience again. I have a sequel coming out that follows the same format, but I don't know if I'll be able to recreate that. For Wrongful, I know I had a lot of trouble, because I remember complaining to friends about it without telling them anything about the novel, because I didn't want to give things away because it will, dilute the energy for the novel. But I can remember saying, this is never going to work. I don't know how I'm doing this. At one point, I suspected every single character of being the wrongdoer. But I think in the end, that really helped me. And even the frustration helped me. So that was a case where with most novels, I'll get a situation and I have to kind of really care about the character. And then, what I'll do is I'll do outlines continually. Like, I'll see what I've got and then outline it and think, well, what's dull here? How can I heighten the energy here? So I find outlines, I'm using them, I'm outlining what I've written. So they're outlines in the midst of it.
Okay.
I don't know if you find with your own writing that you're outlining a good deal or.
I've tried outlining. I've tried to write a couple screenplays and a couple different runs at novels, or where the screenplay was, I was just trying to do a Hallmark rom-com because they have 19 specific acts and it's very the Christmas rom-com is very specific in what happens in each act. The meeting, the being disgusted by each other, the warming up, the Christmas montage, the near kiss, the falling apart, the coming back together. Like it's 19 acts. It's very specific. And I tried to do that and didn't get it done. Had like the big idea, the big arc, but then like getting it into the structure was really hard. And then for the couple bigger stories that I've tried to write, I've got some really strong first chapters out there. And part of it is, one was like a comedy about converting to Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I tried to write it, I was so early in my, like, I had only converted maybe 2 years. I was like maybe only 2 years into being Jewish, and now I'm 20 years in. Mm-hmm. So I have made a lot more hilarious mistakes in my Jewish community since then. So there's more to put in. But I couldn't imagine like an ending. I could imagine I could see the start and the conflict, but I just like couldn't imagine where it would go. Mm-hmm. But with that one, it has never occurred to me to back into the outline. And I think that's an interesting tactic.
Yeah, I find it really helpful. I can't even count the number of times I've outlined what I have to sort of see even how the time works, but also, and even sometimes I'll put beside each portion of the outline, I'll sometimes create a kind of box and write on the right-hand side, what is this for? What is being revealed, so that has really, really helped me. And even to get rid of characters. Sometimes overcomplication occurs for me, and I have to combine characters and realize that some people are doing the same thing or fulfilling the same function. I know with Wrongful, I started out and I think this has helped me as a writer, to give myself a kind of technical problem. In 2026, I have a novel coming out called The Withers, and it's about organ trafficking, and it's in first person. The previous novel to this one, Tabitha Get Up, was in first person. A lot of my short fiction is in first person or third person. Mm-hmm. But I seldom go in and out of heads. And so Wrongful has a particular kind of physical structure for me. In the beginning, the first portion, we go into many heads, which really helped me figure out these people. The middle portion is, we stick very closely to one character, Geneva Finch, the young woman who had come to the first festival and was highly observant. And then at the very end of the novel, it's just in those heads again. And even it's labeled whose head is talking. Yeah. And then everything's wrapped up. I mentioned the technical problems. Years ago, how I got through college as an undergraduate and paid my way was writing stories for a local newspaper, and they'd pay me per stories. And I remember at one point I had just a terrible inability I'd get really nervous. These stories I wrote had to be in. I usually worked with entertainers, and I had to get them in at a certain time at night, and I'd freeze. But as soon as the newspaper started dealing with more computer technology, somehow learning that technique, it just unfroze me entirely. So for me to help me write, sometimes I have to think about something that seems technical or beyond my control. And then I can kind of enter into the manuscript. And I think so much for me, writing is the unconscious. How does this even happen? I think it's like hammering clouds. Like, these people don't exist. Right. I may sometimes derive characters and situations from my own life, but they're so changed in the course of writing about them that they bear little resemblance to my life. So how does that happen? So it has to come through a lot of self-trust. It's taken me a long time to learn to just trust that this will happen. Right now I'm struggling with a manuscript, and I'm thinking it's just so dull and nothing's happening. And I know that it's because somehow I haven't found, maybe it's technical, maybe it's a double story has to enter, something else has to enter before I'm engaged to the point that the rhythms of the story will propel me forward.
Yeah. And with Wrongful, Do you have any book launch celebrations planned yet? Are they TBD? How are you going to celebrate this novel?
Well, on June 8th, my daughter and I are giving a reading together. She just had a book come out. It's called Ghostlit. It's a collection of poems. And, mine comes out in May, Wrongful. So we're going to do a reading at our local bookstore here in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful bookstore. In fact, the owners are our neighbors. And they're really the most creative, welcoming people. They have puppet shows. They have, a visual art gallery there. So, so it'll be really, really fun, I think, for us to read together. My daughter, by the way, in the next couple of days, probably will be having a baby. So it's really great.
Wow.
She just had a book come out and is having a baby. And she lives, in Nebraska. So she'll be coming from Nebraska with the baby and her husband, and we'll get a babysitter for the reading, but we're going to celebrate here locally, which will be really, really nice here. So thanks for asking about that.
That's so exciting.
Her book is called Ghostlit.
Ghostlit.
Yeah, it's astonishing. It's partly about trauma in some ways, emotional trauma. And I just think it's out of this world terrific. She's also a fiction writer too, who's written a novella on the rocks. So
amazing.
So it'll be great to have her with me.
How wonderful! So your new novel, Wrongful, available from Sagging Meniscus Press in May.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that pre-orders are available?
Yes, I do.
So important.
They'll be up everywhere very soon. I think there's a Kindle up already, but the paperback should be up in plenty of time.
Great.
Yeah, so it'll be Amazon, bookshop.org, and right now it's already available. The paperback is available on Asterism.
Okay. Outstanding. Well, Lee, the book is what brings us together today, but we're also here to talk about one of your favorite things. And you mentioned in your email that you love bunnies.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, the name of your podcast is Perfect Finding Favorites, because our rabbit was truly found about 3 years ago on our driveway. We saw this little being stretched out. I didn't even know what it was. We felt so fortunate that we hadn't driven over. We just come in, and our driveway has a kind of horseshoe shape. So thankfully we didn't drive on the side where the little rabbit was. But I just saw a being there and I thought, oh no. And I went in the house just to drop off my purse. And then I thought, well, we have to go out and see what's going on here. And then I heard someone coming on foot, and I ran outside, and it was a tall man, a mail carrier. And I said, thank God he came. He's like a messenger from the underworld of rabbits. I've never seen this mail carrier again. And I said, oh, but please, just so you know, so you don't hurt the little animal. There's an animal lying in our driveway. And this person had raised rabbits.
Oh.
And he knew immediately it wasn't a wild rabbit. He said, that's someone's pet bunny there. And the rabbit didn't even move, so we knew it was near death.
Oh.
So, my husband and I ran in, got a cat carrier because we have cats.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kind man knew how to pick up a bunny, because bunnies are so fragile. You have to be so careful.
Right.
Because they'll break their spines. Their back legs are so strong. They can break their spines if they flounder. And anyway, we got him in. Then the next, got him some water, romaine lettuce. Thank God I didn't know what I was doing, but it was the right kind of lettuce.
Yeah.
He perked up. I called the next morning, because this was at night. I called the next morning a pet shop and ran out and got what he needed, hay and pellets. And then I started posting, because we assumed, he belonged to someone.
Yeah.
And I was abandoned. No one answered our postings. And I emailed people that I knew who knew something about rabbits or had rabbits. No one wanted the rabbit. But by then, we'd already bought him tunnels.
Right.
We were in love with this little guy. So he lives with us. He lives in the house. because we had cats, he has the biggest room in the house. He's never penned. It's just a huge room with a king-size bed for him to bounce on. He's got 5 tunnels. He's got all the room in the world, and he's an absolute joy. I should mention, because Easter's coming up, that's when people sometimes get rabbits.
Right.
And it's also soon when they abandon rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
Because, so often it's assumed that rabbits are a great gift for a child, but they can be very frustrating for a child, and they can be very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbits usually, unless they're trained very early, and it depends on the breed, they don't like being picked up, and children would love to hold a rabbit. Rabbits are very skilled at being adorable, but they can also sometimes just ignore you, a little like cats.
Right.
But you can't really scoop them up. They can be, it sounds like an anti-advertisement for bunnies, but it's just so people know you have to get a special doctor. It's not like your regular doctor. It has to be an exotic pet doctor. Their litter, the bunny, he was a baby. He was only 4 months old. He didn't even need any litter training. I bought an attractant litter. He's just great. He's cleaner than any animal we've ever had. But, that costs too. Their 80% of their diet is Timothy hay, so you can get hay tracked around your house. Mm-hmm. But they're great in the house because they need to run and jump, and there's nothing like a rabbit's joy, because they jump in the air, they make a little twist in the air, and they can jump 3 feet. They'll come up on your bed to say good morning. Oh. But, they can't, this sounds funny, they can't vomit, which means they can have digestive issues. Yeah. So there are a lot of reasons why they're, because they're so fragile, because they have special needs, people have to really consider about getting a rabbit. But if you have the time for them, because they're social animals, you have to either get another rabbit or become a rabbit. Right. Rabbit. It's not just a time commitment, but it's an affection commitment, and they do have special needs.
Yeah. I have 2 sets of friends with rabbits that I follow their rabbit adventures on Instagram. Oh. And what I've learned is a rabbit is not for me. Like, they are really learning how fragile they are. Mm-hmm. And I think because I don't know if Bugs Bunny is why we think they're invincible or what it is, but, like that my friends have had their pet rabbits get gastroparesis, where their intestines just stop moving, and you have to take it to the exotic pet emergency room for thousands of dollars to try and get things moving again. And then if you get the rabbits, like, bonding can take months with another rabbit, that you have to do this really intentional, like, okay, they're going to spend 10 minutes together today, and then we're going to separate them again. Because my friends in Texas, they found their bunnies out in their apartments, like, courtyard, obviously abandoned house pets that had been abandoned together, but had been kind of outside and long enough that they weren't bonded anymore. Mm-hmm. So even though they look like identical twin bunnies, they had to spend months getting them rebonded and getting them to where they could keep them in the same room together. So it's a lot of work, and it is a terrible Easter present. I agree with you.
I'll speak. I've spoken too about the problems with bunnies, but I'll speak about the pleasures too. I know though what you mean about, I've read a lot about, bonding bunnies, and, you have to be careful, what, if it's a boy or a girl. Mm-hmm. But I will say that we just have one bunny, so we have to be the other bunny. We spend a lot of time with the bunny, and it has added immense joy to our life. Even when we had 2 cats, we never put them together. We never trusted them. I have friends who do mix their animals together, different species, and it works well for them. But he is so loving, so sweet. There is nothing like petting a rabbit. And I've petted, I grew up at a farm. I've petted every animal pretty much, and a lot of kittens. The softness, the sweetness. Also, I think because they haven't been domesticated as long as cats and dogs have been as pets, they were, used for meat and fur, and experimentations and research. there's still something very wild about them.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel this sort of connection to something that we've lost in ourselves, some connection to the natural world. So there's also, they become just a source of hilarity, the jumping, the running. There's nothing like a bunny's happiness.
Yeah.
And also they do communicate a lot. Like, our bunny knows his name. He recognizes who's who. I think he prefers my husband to me. He loves me. He prefers me in certain environments. Like he likes, if I'm on the bed, he comes to me. That's what he likes that. He prefers my husband on the floor playing with him. But it's also, they're mysterious animals. They're uncanny animals. There's a reason why so many cultures have invested them with almost occult properties. You can be in one side of the room and suddenly your bunny is there in a blink of an eye. They're so fast. They almost seem like speedy little ghosts.
Yeah.
And they are not only so soft, they let you know when they want to be petted. They put their little chins on the floor. They would be petted for hours if you let them. They'll take little breaks, to clean themselves, and they come right back. So, how in the New York Review of Books they have those interviews where people are asked, what is the best reading environment? And people say wonderful things. If you have a bunny, the best way to read is holding the book. I'm right-handed, my right hand, left hand, petting the bunny. It's just great. And I can even take notes while petting the bunny. So the kind of love that a bunny gives you, and it does feel like love and they bond with you, is so different because, it's a little like a cat's love where you really feel you've earned it. They have good memories. They can remember, experiences they don't like. Their nails have to be clipped. And we have a wonderful person who comes to clip the nails, but he knows the score, immediately. So they'll remember things, but they also remember real kindness and will come again for that. And I just find, I guess they're, after cats and dogs, they're the pet most owned in this country. But they're also one of the pets most abandoned because people assume that they can survive outside.
Right.
And they might for a while. An indoor bunny, a pet bunny, lives maybe 8 to 12 years. Outdoors, they might not last days even.
Yeah.
They don't have a burrow. They don't have natural defenses. They don't know how to defend themselves.
Yeah.
So, they're really at the mercy. Oh, one other thing I'll say about them and in connection with writing also, bunnies are hyper alert. And I had bunnies kind of snuck into my writing a little bit. I have a new novel I just finished where a bunny is actually a character. It doesn't talk. But at the end, that bunny is really crucial to the plot of the novel. And, so they, now I've got one in there. In Wrongful, there's a writer who writes novels, but also writes children's literature, peer. And a main character early in the novel is compared to being like a rabbit. So they do kind of come into my writing little by little, and had even earlier before I had a bunny. But there is a sense, too, that they give just something of the strangeness and mystery to the work. And I think for me to keep on writing, I always have to feel that there's something escaping my mind. All the cerebral attempts. And I think bunnies are that. You really do feel linked to something that just has refused to be tamed, that it's a little feral, you know?
Before this particular bunny came into your life, were there any rabbits in literature that you connected to, or rabbits in mythology that you connected to?
Well, I think, I have 2 daughters and I read them, I realize how many bunny books I read to them. I read to them, I Am a Bunny, again and again and again. And I have a short story, which is a kind of mashup between Midsummer Night's Dream and that children's book, I Am a Bunny, because it was so much part of my life. I love, visual art for bunnies. The German artist Michael Soa, he's done wonderful pictures of bunnies. He has a book about a bunny called Esterhazy, who is part of a royal lineage who visits the Berlin Wall. And the images are almost like something from Hopper. there's a kind of image of absolute loneliness for that bunny. He also has a painting of two women. One is holding a bunny on the younger woman's head. And the title of it is something like, relief. And it's almost like the bunny is giving relief from a headache.
Mm-hmm.
There's always the Awad book Bunny, about the, kind of writing group of MFA students who she thinks of as bunnies, that they're sort of dressed in pink and they're, eat only tiny meals and they're, but they're at the same time, they're mysterious and in their own way deadly. Let's see. There's just so many wonderful things. I mean, I've used Alice in Wonderland in some ways within my work. Of course, there's, rabbits, with Lewis Carroll, John Updike, the, rabbit series. There, the sense of a young man whose glory days were in high school, but he's always swift in the way he, in some ways, tries to be nimble to get out of life's difficult situations of becoming an actual adult there. Yeah. So, there's the Velveteen Rabbit. In some ways, one thing I've noticed is that, even in art museums, you'll be looking and then suddenly you'll see somewhere a little rabbit at the side. So I think that they're and also, I started, every once in a while I'll find a cup with a rabbit on it, or we have, kind of a painting by like a local artist with rabbit on it, or there's a sense that the rabbits are among us. Once you start looking for them, they're so much, on the side of our lives. So I think of, in films, Donnie Darko, or a Harvey, the film with Jimmy Stewart.
With the 6-foot invisible rabbit.
With this invisible rabbit, which is actually very, very moving film. So they're there so much with us.
For my sister and I, it was Bunnicula.
Oh,
the Bunnicula series, which is a bunny who is also a vampire. And Watership Down.
Oh, yes, it's beautiful.
Which is heartbreaking. Yeah, those are the two big stories that come to mind. But if you think about every once in a while a post will go viral with like medieval monks doodles in the in the margins of their Bible, and there's cats and there's bunnies, and medieval art you see bunnies, so they have certainly always captured our imagination.
And in some cases they were linked to witches, that witches could transform into rabbits. And I can imagine how that works with the imagination, because, rabbits are so quick, and they're also, they're so often linked to women and fertility. They can have babies 12 months of the year. They can give birth to a baby and then be pregnant immediately afterwards. Another thing about rabbits, people who want to get a rabbit, they have to be neutered, for the females. Not only because of fertility, but because of cancer, because the female rabbits so often can get uterine cancer if unneutered.
Oh, wow.
So I just read today, and this was Wikipedia, I don't know how true this is, that in the 19th century, fishermen or men on boats or women on boats they never said the word rabbit because they considered that bad luck. So while the rabbit is often considered good luck, it's such a potent symbol that in some cases is considered bad luck.
Yeah.
And I can see why imaginatively these little creatures who are so swift and are so beautiful, but at the same time, if you really look at our rabbit, we have a Rex rabbit, and Rex is a kind of fur because it's a short-haired fur. The hairs are, about equal. They don't have the kind of long hair you see in other rabbits, so they were for their pelts often. But you feel and see that kind of beauty. The rabbits almost look, as if they're assembled. There's those ears, where they regulate, but they're hyper alert. Their vision is almost 360 degrees, except for right in front of their nose. They can't see directly in front of your nose. So if you give a rabbit a little treat in front of its nose, he's going to have a hard time. It'll take a little while to find it. But otherwise, that vision means they can pretty much see behind themselves.
Wow.
And that too seems like witch-like or otherworldly.
Yeah.
And then the burrows, I guess I read too, I'm not sure how true this is, but the ancient Celts thought that they were linked to the underworld because they go into their burrows, and their burrows are amazingly complex. So for all those reasons, you can see why people link them to mysterious elements in life, but also to prosperity and freedom of movement and all too. So a great deal of positive characteristics are linked.
Yeah, we have Chicago is covered in wild bunnies.
Oh, really?
Like the north side where I live, we have, we're really careful with the burrows in our backyard. This summer there was one, and so we just like put a table over it so none of us would trip and fall on it, and to like stop our landlord from mowing it. But there are just wild rabbits in the parks, in the lawns, and you'll just be walking and I always say hi to them. Like, hi rabbit. And we just kind of look at each other, and they decide, like, do they freeze, or do they run away, or do they just go back to eating? But I probably see more rabbits than squirrels.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah, we got a fox in the neighborhood, and so we haven't seen wild rabbits in a while. And they're so interesting because I read that they're the center amygdala for, fear is larger in wild rabbits. That's why they can't really be tamed. It's taken generations of breeding to create the pet rabbits we have now.
Yeah.
They say even the Romans had them. It was really kind of towards the 19th century where rabbits were thought of in Western Europe and the United States as, more like pets. But it's taken a long time so wild rabbits, a wild rabbit got attacked by a dog, and she was teaching at the time and I wasn't. So my husband and I took the wild rabbit to a rehab center, so they could, but it was, we were really afraid because rabbits, another reason why rabbits you've got to be so careful with rabbits, they can die of shock really easily, but especially wild rabbits, because you are a predator to them.
Right.
And even a domestic rabbit, some have died from the sounds of fireworks, something really loud, which is another reason why they're fragile, is they don't like a lot of noise. They like things quiet, which is ironic because they're absolutely silent, which is probably another reason why they seem strange to people.
Right.
They'll only make a noise, they do something, it sounds like a growl when they're happy, when you're petting them. But otherwise, they're silent, except if they think they're dying or in danger. And then it sounds like a child's cry. I've only heard it on YouTube, but also with a terrific vet, but he had the bunny on the examining table, and the bunny got away from him and jumped off, and the cry was terrible. It's like a child's shriek of terror.
Yeah.
And thank God the bunny was all right, because, falling on a hard floor like that, and, it's not good for their little legs. But, their silence is uncanny in some ways. Absolutely quiet. But it's also, it's like having a noiseless baby in the house. They're vulnerable, and you feel protective toward them, but they're hearing with those ears. And he does show off with his toys, responds to clapping and laughter, and will do more of it.
Adorable.
So he responds to noise, but he does not make noise himself.
Yeah.
So taking him to the vet, when we took our cats to the vet, they're furious, they're meowing. You take him to the vet, absolutely quiet. The only sound he does make, though, is he does thump if he hears something he doesn't like, or if he doesn't like his salad, because he's, it's 80% hay, then pellets and his salad, he'll thump on the floor. And the first time I heard it, it sounded like a book fell off a shelf. It was so loud. Those back feet are so strong.
Yeah, so that's where Thumper gets his name.
Yeah, I always thought it was just a cute little Disney thing. But they do that if they're angry. Yeah.
So you mentioned when you first got him, because you had 2 cats at the time, your rabbit had 1 room.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have run of the house now, or you still keep it in that 1 room?
Well, we still have him in the one room. It's the biggest room in the house.
Yeah.
It's got all sorts of accoutrements. It's got a little house for him inside the house.
Yeah.
It's just, the whole room is his. It's something we thought about, but I'm a little afraid that he might get in trouble. You have to baby-proof your whole house. We've already had him in that room. There's a really old TV in there. And he's already, even though we had plastic panels put up, he somehow got through there and chewed through the cable.
Oh gosh.
The TV, and he wasn't hurt, but we had to get everything set up again. So what we do is everything's covered, particularly with panels, and then we have to use tape to keep them and bricks to keep them really firmly in place.
Yeah.
And then overhead lighting, and then some cords are behind a dresser, and we have to make sure the sides can't get in. So it's great. He's never in an enclosure. It's a huge room and all, but we thought, maybe we could have him go into another room. And then another part of me thinks, oh, he's very happy.
Right.
And he
doesn't know he's missing out.
No. And he's not really, he's got a huge runway and all that he really loves, and lots of tunnels. So we're lucky that we have, a place where he can have the full run. But maybe in the future, now that we no longer have our cats, we would just have to really bunny-proof the place and make sure he, I always have fear too of losing him, because I imagine if he ever got out the door, I know he might be so afraid we'd lose him, and that'd be really hard. So I think as long as he has this wild, exciting life up there, and he's, I do know some people, they do keep the bunnies in enclosures at night, even though they're house bunnies. And we're fortunate we don't have to do that or use a playpen or anything. Yeah.
Nice. And you mentioned his salad. Well, you mentioned the day you found him that you happened to have romaine, and then you found out it was the right lettuce. So is there a lot of are you going out for fresh veggies all the time to make salad for him, or?
Yeah, in fact, I have to do today. The bunnies should never have iceberg lettuce. It doesn't really have the nutrients for it. There's a terrific resource called the House Rabbit Society. And, they'll give you all sorts of advice on this. And there's a list of what vegetables to give and what not to give. And I'm very conservative with his vegetables because he did once have stasis. And I kind of think that it might have been stasis is when, as you mentioned, the digestive system isn't working. And I had given him a little tiny bit of cucumber, which is approved. I thought, never again.
Yeah.
So I usually use a lot of romaine lettuce, sometimes a little parsley, carrot fronds he loves. And it's a full plate.
Yeah.
A normal sized plate. And he loves it. And then a quarter cup of these pellets, and then unlimited hay. That's another thing you have to be aware of, too, that he'll spread that hay around a bit, but it's terrific hay. It's terrific hay and all. Another thing, too, is actually tomorrow he goes in for his annual vet appointment, and he'll get his shot. There's a relatively new arrival in this country of a disease that is most often fatal for rabbits. It's a form of viral hepatitis. It's rabbit hemorrhagic disease. And the first sign of it is the little bunny bleeds from the nose. So we have him vaccinated against that. It's more out southwest, but it could come in on his hay, for instance. Yeah. People can track it in on their feet. It's very contagious when, if it shows up. I don't think we have it locally, but if it shows up at a vet's place, they often have to close down to do a thorough cleaning and all. So it's very dangerous. I mean, it's almost 90% fatal often. So that's another thing to just be aware of. But, as with any animal, it is a blessing and a privilege to have them in your life. But it takes care.
Yeah. How wonderful. And now that you have them, are there any local, I can't imagine, are there bunny shows or bunny conventions, or I recently went to PopCat, which was a cat convention in Chicago, which was a craft fair, but only with things with cats on it. It was very fun.
Yeah, there was a cat convention. I never put our cats in it, but I went to one locally. There probably are lots of rabbits, but I tell you, I'm terrified just tomorrow to get him in his carrier.
Sure.
Because it is not easy. I mean,
Right.
because I don't pick him up, you have to find a way. And he's so smart. He knows what that is. In fact, I think I'm going to put that carrier out in the room today so he kind of gets used to it and find some way to get the little guy to go in. I think for our rabbit to a show or anything like that, people do those shows, especially with some of those big, beautiful, fluffy bunnies and those giant rabbits or even the dwarf rabbits. They're so cute. Our little Rex rabbit, I think it would upset him.
Yeah.
It's nerve-wracking even when, friends come in to visit him. He'll run under the bed, and in a little while he might come out of curiosity. So he would not be a good show animal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I understand. Cowboy, who's my cat that you met earlier, when I took him to the vet last year, he howled and cried so loudly and was so angry that they were like, you can never, the next time you bring him in, you have to give him gabapentin. Like,
oh, gosh.
It created such a disturbance for all the animals.
Yeah.
Because he was in another room getting shots and blood work and his nails clipped, and I could hear him like through the 2 walls, and they were just like, you have to come and get drugs next time. It's not safe for anyone. It's not safe for him. So he'll just have home care the next time he needs it. I'll find a mobile vet.
That's really hard because they you wish you could talk to them, or
right.
they'd understand. But they get so distressed, and you do worry about the heart rate. Rabbits' hearts can get up to 300 beats a minute, and that's why they can go into shock.
Yeah.
So you have to be so careful. And I know with our cats too, they, and then when I would find when you bring one cat home, the other cat isn't, they kind of
smell wrong.
Each other. Yeah, they don't recognize each other for a while because what they recognize is that vet office is still on one cat in a sense. Yeah.
Well, Lee, is there anything else about the magic of living with rabbits that you wanted to make sure you shared today?
Well, let's see. I talked about, there's a lot of responsibility, but within the animal, but you do feel you're in the presence of this being who, it's a little surreal. They're so sweet. They're so affectionate. They like to chin you. That's the way they get your scent on you. And they like to be close, and they're delighted when they see you. Rabbits are. If they know you. Yeah. So there's so many rewards with a rabbit that I knew nothing about. I had no idea. And in fact, when we found him, I worked so hard to find the owner, and I worked so hard to find someone who would take him in because I thought, I won't be able to do this, to take care of him. But then you fall in love. And as with any love, you keep discovering something more and more about this being. And I think there's a kind of innate respect that you focus on or develop between yourself and the animal. It's a kind of respect. But there's also nothing like watching a rabbit's ears. Because the ears, those little antennas, they're going. And it's also really, if you see an abandoned pet rabbit, it's not always easy to recognize them, but usually it's because the fur is not kind of the same sort of color you'd find in a rabbit. They tend to be a little chunkier, a little rounder faces, larger eyes. If you do decide to take one in, you need to talk to a vet and to get some advice from the House Rabbit Society or something. But, once you do, I think that there's a particular beauty in that relationship. And with any kind of animal, it's different than a cat, different with the dogs, and it's not in any way superior or inferior. But there is a sense that there's something a little wild in your house, and it will run, it will jump, it will do all sorts of wild little comic activities that will keep you laughing. We laugh all the time about him. He has his toys, he has his tube, a lot of things too. You can, make his toys for him. He'll toss anything and and appreciate it. And you can feel with a bunny that's been abandoned, you're saving a little being. Yeah. And so you're adding a little happiness to another being. And that's kind of the greatest reward in itself. Yeah.
Do you and your husband, it seems obvious you go and you hang out in the bunnies lair.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we had cats, there was always a kind of guilt feeling, though, because, you want to spend a lot of time with the cats, but the bunny's up there and wants to spend a lot of time with you. One way we work it out now is, you can read in the room. So we do a lot of reading in the room. And sometimes I can even work, when I'm working on a notepad there too. And he likes, they like their activity times are dawn and dusk.
Okay.
They like to sleep a lot in the afternoon and all too. And he has a nice little sleep schedule. It's all, he understands things by light.
Yeah.
He has a lot of windows too,
nice.
Which is great also. But we would always feel guilty about the cats or guilty about the rat. Either way. But then we got to remember half the time they're just sleeping.
Everyone's sleeping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Lee, well, this has been, what a lovely way to start a Sunday morning.
Oh, well, it's wonderful to talk with you.
Yeah.
And thank you for these podcasts. They're terrific. And I think the whole idea of favorite things is a wonderful idea, because we all have sometimes things that are beings that are sometimes neglected or ignored and if in one way or another have contoured our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I found it really, I love doing the podcast. It's risky from a hobby point of view. Because almost you talk to anyone about their favorite thing, you're like, oh, well, that could be my favorite thing. That could be my next favorite thing too. But lucky for me, I have had enough education that I understand. I'm like, I would love to sit and read with a rabbit and have it let me pet it. But I know that I'm not a rabbit owner. I don't think that is something my life is built for. And I think it's important to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also Cowboy has a vote, I'm sure.
Yes. He would be unhappy. Very unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one more time, your new novel, Wrongful, available from Sagging Meniscus Press. It will be available for pre-sale on bookshop.org, Amazon, Kindle, and it is available in May.
Yeah, it's coming out really soon. I'm really excited about it. I have the best publisher in the world. He really is devoted to unconventional literature, and they've been just terrific to work with. So I feel very, very fortunate.
Outstanding. Well, Lee, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.